Good day, and welcome to another AI podcast at DigitView,
where innovation meets insight, machine learning to responsible AI.
So, I was actually looking at my browser history from last night.
Oh no, that's usually dangerous territory.
Tell me about it. It was like 1:0 a.m. I should have been sleeping. I really should have been. Instead, I am just doom scrolling, and I ended up buying this piece of exercise equipment that I fundamentally know I will never actually use.
But you clicked purchase anyway.
I clicked it anyway. And the crazy thing is, as I hovered over that purchase button, there was this tiny rational voice in the back of my head screaming at me. It was saying, don't do it. You are tired. You are emotional. This is a bad decision. You literally have a treadmill in the basement that is currently functioning as a very expensive clothes rack.
Right, the clothes rack treadmill.
Yeah. And I ignored that voice. And this is the thing that really haunts me, and I think it haunts everyone listening to this right now. We are ostensibly the most intelligent species on Earth. We can split the atom, we can edit genomes, we write symphonies, but we just cannot seem to stop ourselves from eating that third slice of cake, or texting that X we know is toxic, or panic selling a stock the literal second the graph turns red.
It is the human paradox. It is really the central mystery of our existence when you get right down to it.
It feels like a glitch, honestly. It feels like we are just broken. Like, if we are so incredibly smart, why are we so incredibly stupid?
See, that is exactly where you are wrong. And that at the core of the source material we are doing a deep dive into today. We have this massive stack of research here titled Metacognitive Systems for Human Error Correction.
Which, it sounds incredibly dry.
It sounds academic, sure, but it's actually a detective story.
A detective story about why we are our own worst enemies.
Exactly. And the twist ending of this story, you aren't broken, you aren't stupid, and you aren't weak. If there's one thing I want you all to lock into your brains right now as we start this deep dive, it is this idea. Self-sabotage is not a bug. It is a feature of a highly complex and slightly outdated system.
A feature. Okay, you are going to have to really sell me on that. Because anxiety and procrastination and making terrible financial decisions at 1:00 a.m., they certainly feel like bugs. They feel like malware in my brain.
They feel like bugs because we are running them in the completely wrong environment. So today our mission is to explore this incredible convergence of biology and culture and consciousness. We're going to look at everything from the behavior of single-celled organisms all the way up to the algorithms running your social media feeds. And we are going to figure out how we can reprogram the machine.
Reprogram the human machine?
Or at least update the software.
Yeah.
Because right now, the hardware is severely lagging.
All right, let's get into that hardware first. Because the source material starts with what they call the hardware problem. And they use a phrase that I found kind of insulting, honestly. They refer to the human brain as an antique.
Well, it is an antique. Look, I want you to imagine you have a top-of-the-line video game. You know, incredible graphics, massive processing requirements, real-time ray tracing, all of that. Now try to run that game on a Commodore 64 from the 1980s.
It crashes. I mean, it doesn't even load at all.
Worse than that. It tries to run it, but it misinterprets the data completely.
Yeah.
The human brain, physically, the actual wetware inside your skull hasn't had a major hardware update in about 300,000 years.
So we are basically operating on version 1.0 of Homo sapiens.
We are running an operating system that was meticulously designed for the African savanna. Let's really paint that picture for a second because it is absolutely crucial for understanding everything else. 300,000 years ago, what were the actual daily threats?
Lions, I guess. Starvation. Maybe a rival tribe coming over the hill to take your territory.
Right. Physical, immediate, and very high-stakes threats. If you made a mistake, you literally died. Calories were scarce. Sugar was incredibly rare. Social rejection meant expulsion from the tribe, which effectively meant death by exposure or starvation.
So our neural circuits were optimized for 3 basic rules. Eat everything you find, run from anything that moves, and never ever make the tribe angry.
Spot on. Now fast forward to 2026. We are taking that exact same biological machinery, that specific fear response, that calorie hoarding instinct, and we are dropping it into a modern world of infinite calories and digital tribalism and 401k accounts.
So when I am staring at my retirement portfolio and the stock market drops 5%, and I feel that sudden pit in my stomach.
That is your ancient savanna brain seeing a predator in the tall grass. Your amygdala does not know what a stock market is. It does not understand compound interest. It just sees a massive threat to your resources. So it dumps cortisol straight into your bloodstream. It screams at you to run. And in the stock market, running means panic selling right at the bottom.
Which is exactly the mathematically wrong thing to do.
It is the exact opposite of what you should do. But your biology is screaming at you to survive. You are essentially trying to use a smoke detector to regulate the temperature of a nuclear reactor. The input is just entirely too complex for the sensor to handle.
Man, that makes so much sense. And this leads us right into a framework that I think a lot of people know, but the source material adds a really scary new layer to it. We are talking about Daniel Kahneman, right? Thinking Fast and Slow.
Yeah, the classic framework. We really can't skip over it because it sets the foundation. Kahneman gave us System 1 and System 2.
Let me do the quick recap for anyone who hasn't read it, just to make sure we are all on the same page. System 1 is that savannah brain. It is fast, it is automatic, and it is entirely emotional. You see a shadow in your peripheral vision and you jump back. You don't consciously decide to jump, you just suddenly find yourself 2 feet away. It is energy efficient, and it is what you use for like 95% of your day.
Exactly. And System 2.
System 2 is the professor. It is slow and deliberate and highly analytical. It is the part of your brain you use to do long division or to parallel park a car in a tight space. It takes a ton of metabolic energy. It is lazy. It basically does not want to turn on unless it absolutely has to.
Perfect summary. So that is the established science. System 1 drives the car on autopilot, and System 2 grabs the steering wheel when things get complicated. But this new research from the source material, this actually blew my mind. They are proposing something entirely new, a System 0.
Yes. This part was wild. Cyberpsychology researchers looking at the 2025 data. This really changes everything about how we understand our own thoughts. Walk us through System 0.
So System 0 is defined as external artificial intelligence functioning as a cognitive preprocessor.
Okay, that is a lot of academic jargon. Break down cognitive preprocessor for me.
To understand this, you first have to understand a neuroscience concept called predictive coding. Your brain does not actually see reality like a video camera recording a scene. It creates a simulation, a rapid prediction of what it expects to see based on past data.
Okay, so I am essentially hallucinating my reality based on my expectations.
In a way, yes, you are. Now think about how you consume information today. You don't walk outside and look at the raw physical world to understand what is happening globally. You look at a screen. You look at a search engine result. You look at a curated social media feed.
Right. Most of what I know about the world comes through a glowing rectangle.
And before your System 1 even sees that information, before you even have a chance to have a subconscious emotional reaction, let alone a logical system, System 2 thought an algorithm has already curated it. It has selected what you see, it has chosen how it is framed, and it has decided what is omitted entirely.
So it is actively filtering reality before it reaches my eyes.
It is not just filtering it is weighting it. It becomes the foundational substrate of your reality. If System 0, the AI, decides that user engagement is its ultimate goal, it will feed you 5 articles about a terrifying new virus and 0 articles about the high recovery rate.
So my System 1 fear brain gets triggered immediately. I am completely panicked.
You are panicked. And the scary part is you think you are reacting to reality, but you aren't. You are reacting to a meticulously curated slice of reality that was mathematically designed to trigger that exact emotional response. System 0 has effectively hacked System 1 before System 2 even entered the chat.
That is just terrifying. It implies we aren't even really in control of the input layer of our own consciousness anymore. We have outsourced our perception to machines.
We have outsourced the perception layer to algorithms that are usually optimized for corporate profit, not objective truth. And because our ancient brain is already hardwired for paranoia, this is an incredibly dangerous combination.
Let's connect that back to the evolutionary biology part. Yeah. Why is the ancient brain so uniquely susceptible to the System 0 manipulation?
That connects directly to something called error management theory.
Right. I highlighted this section heavily. The whole idea of why anxiety is actually a feature. This is the wrestling bush analogy, right?
It is the absolute best way to understand why we are all walking around so anxious all the time. Imagine you are that early human on the African savanna. You are walking along, minding your own business, gathering berries, and you see a bush rustle ahead of you.
Okay, I see the bush move.
You have exactly 2 choices. Choice A is you assume it is a lion and you sprint away as fast as you can. Choice B is you assume it is just the wind and you keep casually walking.
All right, let's play this out. I choose choice A. I run away. But it turns out it was just the wind.
Okay, so you made a mistake.
Yeah.
In statistics, that is called a type 1 error or a false positive. Now, what is the actual cost of that mistake?
I feel kind of dumb. I burned a couple hundred calories running away from nothing.
Exactly. The biological cost is negligible. You are a little embarrassed, you are a little tired, but you live to see tomorrow. Now let's try choice B. You confidently assume it is just the wind, but it is actually a hungry lion.
Well, then I am lunch.
You are dead. That is a type 2 error, a false negative. The cost of that mistake is infinite. It is game over. You are removed from the gene pool.
So evolution honestly doesn't care about us being accurate. It only cares about keeping us alive.
Bingo. Evolution will always, 100% of the time, bias a species toward the cheaper mistake. Over thousands of generations, the early humans who were super chill, the ones who said, hey, this is probably just the wind, they all got eaten, they didn't pass on their genes. We are the direct descendants, the paranoid ones. We are the children of the hyper-anxious.
So we literally have a biological hair trigger for threat detection.
We are fundamentally designed to see lions where there are only shadows. Now bring that concept back to System 0 today. You open your phone in the morning, System 0 feeds you a massive, bold headline saying the economy is crashing.
My hair trigger goes off instantly.
Your ancient brain sees a lion. Now, your logical system 2 knows it is probably just a routine market correction. But System 1, which is heavily biased by error management theory, is screaming at you to run. And the worst part is System 0 immediately notices that you clicked on that fearful headline, so it keeps feeding you more lion videos.
It is a perfect storm. We are biologically wired to overreact to threats, and we have built a digital infrastructure that does nothing but feed us triggers.
And this phenomenon is not just unique to humans. The source material points out that this kind of costly signaling or evolutionary hedging is everywhere in nature. Did you catch the section about the elk?
Oh, the Irish elk. The extinct ones with the massive antlers.
Huge antlers. We are talking 12 feet across. Now, from a basic daily survival standpoint, those things are an absolute disaster. They get caught in the trees. They're incredibly heavy. They slow the elk down significantly when wolves are chasing them.
So why on earth would evolution select for them?
Sexual selection. In this case, the genes favor reproduction over pure survival. The massive antlers send a signal to mates. They say, look at me, I have so much excess vitality and surplus energy that I can afford to grow these utterly useless giant bone structures on my head and still survive.
It is basically a biological flex.
It is the ultimate flex. And human beings do this exact same thing. We take massive, completely unnecessary risks. We drive fast cars. We day trade volatile crypto assets. We engage in dangerous social posturing. And we don't do it because it helps us survive. We do it because it signals fitness and status to the tribe.
So when I see a guy on the internet betting his entire life savings on a highly volatile meme stock,
that is the modern human equivalent of growing 12-foot antlers. It is a high-risk, high-visibility signal. It is totally irrational for financial survival, but it makes perfect sense for social reproduction and status climbing.
Wow. I want to pivot to the biggest overarching concept in this first section before we start talking about the specific cognitive biases, the actual physics of behavior. The source discusses the universe principle, entropy versus negentropy. This part felt really profound to me.
It is the ultimate context for human behavior. If you don't grasp this, you simply cannot understand why being disciplined feels so incredibly hard.
Okay, let's do and explain it like I'm 5 for entropy.
Entropy is a law of thermodynamics. It is the natural tendency of the entire universe to move toward disorder and chaos. Think about a clean garage. If you leave a perfectly clean garage, completely alone for 100 years, does it magically get cleaner?
No, definitely not. It gets incredibly dusty, spiders move in, the roof eventually leaks, things start to rot and rust.
Right. Disorder is the default state of reality. It requires absolutely zero energy for a system to fall apart. Now, what is negentropy?
Negative entropy.
It is the exact opposite. Negentropy is the active injection of energy into a system to create and maintain order. Sweeping that garage is negentropy.
Yeah.
Building a complex biological cell is negentropy. Maintaining a healthy marriage or building a solid retirement fund, that is negentropy. It is a literal fight against the fundamental laws of the universe.
So when I'm feeling lazy and I just want to sit on the couch and watch TV...
Laziness is just physics. Laziness is your body surrendering to entropy. It is the path of absolute least resistance. To force yourself to get off that couch and go to the gym is to formally declare war on the laws of physics. You are actively generating negentropy.
I have to say that is weirdly comforting. It is not just that I have terrible willpower, it is that I'm actively fighting cosmic gravity.
You are fighting psychological gravity.
Right.
And the primary reason we fail so often is that the human brain is an energy-conserving organ. It naturally wants to slide back into entropy. It desperately wants the immediate, easy reward rather than the long-term, difficult plan.
Which sets the stage so perfectly for the specific software glitches. We have talked about the hardware, the paranoid, energy-conserving, antique brain. Now let's look at the flawed software that runs on it, the cognitive biases.
The invisible architects of all our worst decisions.
The source material lists over 200 of these biases. We obviously cannot go through 200 today, but there are a few key ones that seem to be the greatest hits of ruining our lives.
The four horsemen of self-sabotage, if you will.
Let's start with the one that basically explains why all online discourse is a complete hellscape right now, confirmation bias. Now, I know everyone thinks they already know what this is. People say, oh, it just means I like to hear things I already agree with.
It is so much deeper and so much deadlier than just liking what you agree with. It is an active cognitive filtering process. The human brain will physically reject factual information if it contradicts its current internal model of the world.
The specific medical example they provided in the notes was genuinely chilling.
It really highlights the lethal danger of this bias. Imagine you have a patient who has just been diagnosed with a life-threatening illness, let's say a very aggressive cancer. And this patient has deeply internalized a belief, maybe they heard it from a friend or read it on a fringe blog, that chemotherapy is just toxic poison and that drinking a specific type of fruit juice cures everything naturally.
Unfortunately, a very common narrative out there.
When this patient interacts with the real world, their confirmation bias acts like an invisible force field. If you sit them down and show them a peer-reviewed clinical study from a top hospital that says the juice protocol does not work, they don't just politely disagree. They will actively find a flaw in the study. They will claim the researchers are corrupt or that Big Pharma faked the data. But if they are scrolling online and find exactly one anecdotal blog post from some guy named Steve who says he drank the juice and lived,
boom. They say, see, I knew it all along.
They latch onto Steve's story like a life raft. They're literally risking their own physical death just to protect their existing belief structure.
But why? Why on earth would the human brain prioritize being conceptually right over physically staying alive?
Because for our ancient ancestors, being completely wrong about the tribe's deeply held beliefs meant immediate expulsion. As we discussed, social death was just as fatal as physical death on the savannah. So we evolved to protect our tribal beliefs just as ferociously as we protect our physical bodies.
And System Zero, the AI algorithms, they absolutely love this.
System Zero weaponizes confirmation bias for profit. If you click on that juice cures cancer link just one time, the algorithm instantly says, oh, okay, this user wants to exist entirely inside the juice universe. And it seamlessly feeds you 10 more similar links. Within a single week, you aren't just being stubborn. You are operating in a completely different factual reality than your oncologist.
It isn't just a gap in information anymore. It is a literal gap in reality, which leads right into the next major bias, and this is the one I think is the main reason I am not wealthy yet. Present bias, or as the economists call it, temporal discounting.
This one is the absolute core conflict of the human condition. A reward that you receive today is worth significantly more to your brain than that exact same reward received a year from now.
Even if the future reward is objectively way bigger.
Much, much bigger. The brain heavily discounts the value of the future. The statistic in the source material here is just staggering. 70% of Americans have insufficient savings for retirement.
70%, that is a massive societal crisis.
It is a crisis. And it is not because 70% of people don't understand basic math. It is entirely because of how the human brain visually processes the concept of time. There are these fascinating fMRI studies, functional brain scans, that show what happens when you think about yourself today. A very specific region in the medial prefrontal cortex lights up.
Sort of the me center of the brain.
Right, the core identity center. But when the researchers ask those same people to think about themselves 10 or 20 years in the future, that me center goes completely dark. Instead, the part of the brain that lights up is the exact same region that activates when you think about a total stranger.
Wait. So neurologically speaking, my brain views future me as a complete stranger.
Yes. To your biological brain, setting aside money for your retirement feels exactly the same as giving your hard-earned cash away to a random stranger on the street. It genuinely feels like a painful loss. The present self desperately wants the immediate dopamine hit of spending that money right now.
That explains so much about human behavior. I mean, intellectually using my system 2, I know I am going to be that older guy in 30 years. But emotionally using my system 1, I don't know him at all.
You have absolutely no visceral empathy for him. And that perfectly sets up the next bias, which is loss aversion. The source notes that the psychological pain of losing something is roughly twice as intense as the pleasure of gaining that exact same thing.
The famous 2-to-1 ratio.
Exactly. This is the primary reason why people stay in terrible situations for years. And it brings us directly to the sunk cost fallacy.
I found the cancer treatment example for sunk cost in the source material to be really incredibly sad.
It is totally heartbreaking. A patient might actively refuse to stop a brutal, ineffective treatment, one that is actively making them sick and showing zero positive results, simply because they've already spent so much precious time and money and emotional hope on it. To stop the treatment now would be to consciously admit that the entire investment was lost. So they continuously throw good money, or in this case, good time, and physical health after bad.
It is the exact same cognitive mechanism that makes people stay in abusive relationships or keep pouring thousands of dollars into fixing a car that is an absolute lemon. They tell themselves, I have already put so much into it, I can't walk away now.
Exactly. True rationality would say, look only at the future. Is this current path working? Yes or no? But loss aversion says, look at the past. Look at everything you would be losing if you quit.
Let's hit one more bias before we move on to emotions, because this one circles back to AI in a really interesting way. Optimism bias and the planning fallacy.
Oh, yes. Humans are practically pathological in our optimism regarding our own personal plans. We consistently and dramatically overestimate positive outcomes while completely underestimating costs and timelines.
Look, I feel personally attacked by this one. This is literally every home renovation project I have ever attempted. I tell my partner, oh, we will just knock down this one drywall partition and it'll take a weekend tops.
And then 6 weeks later, you have no functioning kitchen. There's dust everywhere and you are crying in the shower. But here is the truly fascinating AI insight from the research. When artificial intelligence systems analyze massive global datasets of human projects, everything from local kitchen remodels to constructing international airports, the AI consistently finds that actual completion times are 1.5 to 3 times longer than the initial human estimate.
Consistently, across all industries.
Consistently everywhere. It is basically a fundamental law of human nature. We always assume the best-case scenario. We never ever plan for the inevitable friction of reality. The source material notes that AI software is now regularly being used by major corporations to algorithmically correct human optimism. Basically, a human project manager will present a plan and say, we can definitely build this in 6 months. And the AI looks at the historical data and bluntly says, no, you cannot. So let's take 14 months.
We literally need an artificial intelligence to serve as a reality check. We need a machine to look us in the eye and say you are completely delusional.
We really do. We cannot accurately see our own blind spots.
Okay, let's transition into segment 3. We have covered the ancient hardware, and we have covered the buggy software. Now let's talk about the operating system that drives everything. Emotions and beliefs.
The deep operating system.
The source material works hard to reframe how we view emotions. Culturally, we generally think of emotions as the exact opposite of reason. The whole don't get emotional, just be logical trope. But the expert perspective presented here is that emotions aren't the enemy of reason at all. They're actually a much older form of ancient intelligence.
They're simply faster, older decision-making algorithms. Millions of years before we evolved a massive prefrontal cortex to do complex math and logical deduction, our emotions were what kept us alive in a brutal world. Fear kept us from casually walking off steep cliffs. Disgust kept us from eating visibly rotting meat.
But once again, we run into the massive mismatch problem. Let's dig into fear and risk assessment. The flying versus driving example they use is an absolute classic, but the statistical numbers always shock me.
It is the ultimate real-world proof of how human fear violently distorts basic mathematics. The intense fear of flying kills approximately 400 people every single year in the United States alone.
Wait, let me clarify that for the listener. Not in actual airplane crashes, right?
No, not in plane crashes. These are people who consciously choose to drive to their destination instead of flying, specifically because flying gives them anxiety. Statistically speaking, driving a car is approximately 96 times more dangerous per mile than sitting in a commercial airplane. But because flying feels inherently scary, you're at 30,000 feet in the air, you're trapped in a metal tube, you have zero control over the vehicle. People opt for the car.
So they willingly choose the mathematically far deadlier option purely because it gives them a subjective feeling of safety.
It is the cognitive illusion of control. When you are sitting in the driver's seat of a car, you have both your hands firmly on the steering wheel. Your brain thinks, well, if something bad happens out there, I can just swerve. I am in control. In a passenger plane, you are entirely passive. The ancient brain fundamentally conflates the feeling of physical control with the reality of safety.
That is wild. Let's move to a different emotion that dominates our current culture: anger. Specifically, the concept of moral outrage.
This is an absolutely massive driver of modern collective behavior. Psychologically speaking, moral outrage is a highly potent neurochemical cocktail of both anger and disgust. And in our modern attention-based digital economy, it is by far the most viral emotional state a human can experience.
Wait, so moral outrage spreads faster than joy or happiness?
Oh, much, much faster. Happiness is a nice feeling, but it doesn't biologically demand any immediate action. You feel happy and you just sit there and enjoy it. Outrage, however, demands an urgent, aggressive response. It demands that you hit retweet. It demands that you write an angry comment. And the tech platforms know this metric inside and out. So we end up trapped in these perpetual, infinite cycles of algorithmic outrage.
And the source material makes a really key point here. When we are deeply angry, we become highly reactive. We become completely polarized. And critically, we become incredibly susceptible to outside manipulation.
A population that is locked in a constant state of moral outrage is very easy to steer, politically and commercially. You simply have to point their anger at whoever you designate as the enemy.
Which connects directly to why our society cannot seem to agree on basic objective facts anymore. This specific section on belief systems and identity fusion really explained to me why arguing with strangers on the internet is a complete and utter waste of time.
It is completely futile. The psychological concept is called identity fusion. When a specific belief, and this could be a political ideology, a religious dogma, or even extreme brand loyalty to a tech company, becomes deeply fused with your core sense of self-attacking, that belief feels exactly like a literal physical attack on your physical body.
So if I try to calmly explain to you with facts why your preferred political candidate's policy is mathematically flawed, or even just tell you that your favorite movie is terrible,
your brain processes that incoming information using the exact same neural pathways as if I had just walked up and punched you hard in the face. Literally. Brain scans provide the neural evidence for this. Confronting a person's fused political beliefs aggressively activates the threat response regions of the brain. The amygdala flares up, the exact same region that lights up if a grizzly bear suddenly kicked down the door to this room.
So presenting facts doesn't change people's minds because the brain isn't even trying to process the facts. It is desperately deploying defenses to protect its own existential survival.
It's exactly right.
Yeah.
It ceases to be an intellectual debate about data. It instantly becomes a life or death combat zone for the amygdala.
Man. There is one more emotion mentioned in this segment that I really want to touch on because it is actually framed as a good type of irrationality: the paradox of love.
Yes, we absolutely cannot ignore this one. Love is the ultimate counter-interest force in human psychology. If you look at human reproduction purely from a cold, rational economic perspective, having children is a genuinely terrible decision. It aggressively drains your resources, it permanently ruins your sleep schedules, it stunts career advancement, and it takes a massive physical toll on the body.
It is just a massive, decades-long financial and biological drain.
But we enthusiastically do it anyway. Parents will eagerly sacrifice absolutely everything, including their own lives, for their children. Soldiers will willingly throw themselves on grenades to save their platoons. This profound irrationality, this ability to place the survival of the group or the loved one far above the survival of the self, is the absolute bedrock of human civilization. We fundamentally would not be here having this conversation without it. So it is crucial to remember that not all acting against sheer self-interest is a bug. Sometimes it is the exact thing that makes us beautifully human.
That is a really beautiful and necessary nuance. But then, of course, the text pivots right back to the dark side of our social wiring, the concepts of social pain and shame.
This is the shadow side of our deeply tribal social nature. Recent neuroscience has proven that experiencing intense social rejection actively triggers the exact same neural pain matrices in the brain as experiencing blunt physical trauma.
So that the subjective feeling of social pain is processed as literal physical pain by the human brain.
Correct. In fact, there are clinical studies showing that taking an over-the-counter painkiller like Tylenol can actually measurably reduce a person's subjective feelings of social rejection and heartbreak. That is how deeply intertwined the physical and social pain networks are. And this deep biological fear of social pain drives some truly terrible life decisions. People will stay trapped in completely miserable, abusive careers for decades simply because they are terrified of the social shame associated with quitting or failing. Or, and this one is tragically common, they actively avoid going in for necessary medical checkups.
Why would someone avoid the doctor if they know they might be sick?
Because they're profoundly afraid of the doctor's judgment. They deeply fear the social shame of being officially labeled as sick or being told they are overweight or having to admit they have neglected their physical health for years. For many people, they would literally rather risk dying of an undiagnosed disease than sit in a little room and face the searing social pain of a medical professional looking at them with disappointment.
That is absolutely heartbreaking.
It is. It is a profound, real-world example of how our ancient social wiring can completely override our basic biological survival instinct.
All right, let's physically zoom out again. We have looked extensively at all the internal stuff, the brain, the biases, the emotions. Now we need to look at the external environment. Segment 4 in the outline, incentives and structural failure.
This section completely dismantles the old rational actor myth that classical economics is built on. The old academic idea was that if you clearly give human beings a financial or structural incentive, they will systematically and logically act to maximize that incentive.
But clearly we don't do that. We are way too messy and emotional for that.
Well, we do respond heavily to incentives, but very often we respond in bizarre ways that the system designers completely fail to anticipate. Look at the modern healthcare industry as the prime example.
The text focuses heavily on the fee-for-service model.
Right. In many major medical systems around the world, doctors and hospitals are paid specifically for performing interventions and procedures. They are financially compensated when they actively treat a sick person. They are notably not financially rewarded if they successfully coach you to stay perfectly healthy and you never actually need to come into the clinic.
So the entire massive economic system is structurally biased toward expensive reactive treatments rather than cheap, proactive, preventative care.
Exactly. The dominant financial incentive is literally just do more medical stuff. It does not fundamentally create more human health. And this massive systemic misalignment costs societies trillions of dollars every decade. It is absolutely not that doctors or nurses are bad or greedy people, not at all. It is that the underlying economic environment relentlessly pushes a specific set of behaviors. If society pays out its wealth for sickness, society will inevitably get more sickness.
It's the exact same dynamic in the corporate business world, the whole concept of short-termism.
Yes. Think about it. If a corporate executive's multi-million-dollar bonus is tied directly to the company's stock price at the end of this current 3-month quarter, what exactly are they going to do? They will instantly cut the long-term research and development budget. They will dangerously delay critical infrastructure maintenance. They will ruthlessly lay off 10% of the workforce to artificially boost the profit margins today.
Even if making those cuts critically cripples the company's ability to compete 5 years down the line.
By the time the actual structural damage hits the balance sheet, that executive has likely already cashed out their massive bonus and moved on to another company. They perfectly maximized their personal incentive structure, but they systematically destroyed the long-term survival value of the organization. It is present bias, fully institutionalized on a massive scale.
And then, of course, there is the biggest structural incentive problem we all live inside every single day, the engagement trap of modern social media.
We touched on this briefly when we discussed moral outrage, but looking at it structurally, these massive digital platforms are entirely economically incentivized to maximize one specific metric: time on platform.
That is their single North Star metric. That is how they serve more ads and make more billions.
That is the only God they worship. And unfortunately for all of us, the specific content that is mathematically proven to keep human beings glued to a glowing screen for hours on end is very rarely the content that makes us feel deeply happy or at peace. It is definitely not the content that makes us well-informed, nuanced citizens. The sticky content is raw fear, vicious tribalism, and intense outrage. So we have collectively built the most powerful, sophisticated information engines in human history, and we have explicitly optimized them to make ourselves deeply miserable, simply because human misery keeps the thumb scrolling.
There is a really heavy line from the source material that stuck with me. Quote, "The system is optimized against human well-being," unquote.
It is the absolute textbook definition of a catastrophic structural failure. We are like lab rats in a digital cage, desperately pressing a little metal lever that we know is going to shock us. But the dopamine loops are so deeply hacked that we literally cannot stop pressing it.
All right, that brings us to segment 5, the new frontier. Artificial intelligence's actual role in all of this. We talked about System 0 earlier as a source of manipulation, but now the source pivots to talk about AI acting as a mirror.
This is where things get really fascinating and honestly quite hopeful. For the absolute first time in human evolutionary history, We now possess a technology capable of objectively observing and analyzing human decision-making processes at a planetary population scale. AI sees absolutely everything.
It clearly sees the behavioral patterns that we are too close to see ourselves.
It sees the confirmation bias in our search queries. It perfectly calculates the planning fallacy in our construction timelines in real time. And this incredible observational power leads directly to the concept of nudge theory applied at scale.
What exactly is a nudge in this behavioral economics context?
A nudge is a subtle, intentional change in how a specific choice is visually or structurally presented to a person. The key is that it gently guides behavior without actually forbidding any of the alternative options. The classic example is making a corporate 401k retirement plan opt out instead of opt in.
Oh, right. So when you start a new job, HR automatically enrolls you in the savings plan unless you explicitly fill out a form to stop them.
Right. If the default setting requires you to do absolutely nothing in order to save money for your future, people will naturally save money. Because humans are inherently lazy. Remember the universe principle, entropy. Nudge theory works perfectly because it actively uses our biological laziness to our own advantage. And now AI systems can do this kind of nudging dynamically and constantly. It can subtly frame daily digital choices in ways that actively help us bypass our own worst cognitive biases.
So in theory, it could act as a highly benevolent digital guide. It could pop up a notification saying, hey, I notice you usually heavily regret buying expensive exercise equipment after midnight. Are you absolutely sure you want to process this transaction right now?
In an ideal scenario, yes, exactly. But the source material is very quick to point out the severe novel dangers here. They highlight a specific new psychological phenomenon documented in 2025 called automation bias.
This is the phenomenon they described as driving your GPS directly into a river, right?
Exactly. Automation bias is the deeply ingrained human tendency to explicitly overtrust the output of automated algorithmic systems, even when that system is visibly and obviously completely wrong.
The medical example they gave with the radiologist was really unnerving.
It is a landmark psychological study. You take a highly trained human radiologist with decades of experience, they look at an X-ray scan, and their training tells them there is a subtle but distinct tumor there. But if the AI diagnostic tool explicitly flags the image and says no tumor detected, the human doctor is statistically highly likely to immediately second-guess their own hard-earned expertise and simply agree with the machine's output. They effectively shut down their own critical system 2 thinking process.
Because there is this underlying assumption that the computer must be right. It can process millions of data points, so it is obviously smarter than me.
Exactly right. And the terrifying part is as these AI systems get smoother and more conversational and more objectively capable, this dynamic rapidly gets worse. We stop double-checking the math. We stop doing the hard critical thinking. We willingly surrender our own cognitive agency. We slowly devolve from being active thinkers into just being passive button pushers executing the machine's will.
And then there is the even deeper issue of the psychological feedback loop. The research paper from Nature Human Behavior published in 2025.
This is absolutely critical for our future. That research proves that continuous AI feedback loops actually subtly alter the core of who we are as individuals. If an algorithmic feed constantly serves you specialized content that perfectly validates your specific flavor of anger, you don't just temporarily stay angry, you fundamentally become a more chronically angry person. Your actual neural pathways physically change to accommodate that constant state.
So the AI is not just passively observing us through a mirror, it is actively sculpting our neural architecture.
It is weaponized neuroplasticity operating at a global scale. We are being continuously and fundamentally shaped by the very digital tools we created.
Which leads us directly to what the source calls the critical insight of the entire deep dive. Artificial intelligence is absolutely not neutral.
It is never inherently neutral. Code always embeds the underlying values of its creators. An AI system that is ruthlessly optimized for maximizing user engagement creates a completely different society than an AI system that is meticulously optimized for factual accuracy, or an AI optimized for human flourishing.
The exact quote from the source here is, "The choice of what to optimize for is the single most critical human decision remaining."
That is the whole ballgame right there. If we instruct the AI simply to keep human eyeballs glued to the screen no matter what, it will inevitably destroy our psychological health to achieve that goal. If we somehow manage to explicitly program it to help humans reach their full potential, it might honestly be the tool that saves us from ourselves. But the massive existential problem is we first have to rigidly define exactly what human flourishing even means. And historically speaking, we humans are notoriously terrible at agreeing on that definition.
Okay, that feels like a massive existential cliffhanger, but we did promise the listeners some actionable solutions today. Segment 6, the path forward. How on earth do we actually fix this massive hardware and software mismatch? The source material strongly suggests something called metacognition.
Metacognition is a big word, but it simply means the act of thinking about your own thinking.
How do you practically train that? Is it just doing daily mindfulness meditation?
Meditation is definitely a powerful tool for it, yes. But practically, it is really about developing the ability to recognize your own cognitive biases actively in real time. It is the mental discipline of forcefully hitting the pause button right when you feel that massive biological surge of political outrage and asking yourself, wait, is this my rational system too talking? Or is this just my savanna amygdala firing? Is this actually my own authentic thought? Or did an algorithmic system zero deliberately plant this reaction in my head?
So it is essentially treating your own biological brain like a wild animal that you are quietly observing, saying, oh, look at that, my threat detection hardware is acting up again.
Exactly. It is about emotional detachment. You learn to reframe the internal narrative from, I am furious right now, to, I am currently experiencing the physiological sensation of anger. That tiny linguistic shift gives your slow, deliberate system 2 the precious milliseconds it needs to boot up and grab the steering wheel before you do something stupid.
But the source also makes it crystal clear that we cannot just rely on pure individual willpower to solve this at scale. It heavily emphasizes the need for structural redesign.
Because willpower is a biologically limited metabolic resource. It depletes over the course of the day. You should never rely on it as your primary defense strategy. You have to physically change the environment around you.
Like the classic advice to stop keeping junk food on the kitchen counter if you are actively trying to lose weight.
That is the perfect micro-level example. But we need to apply that logic at a macro-societal policy level. We need to completely restructure our subsidies to make highly nutritious food significantly cheaper than processed junk food. We need to make aggressive retirement savings the absolute default opt-out choice for every single worker. We have to purposefully design our entire society to make the difficult long-term healthy choice the path of absolute least resistance. We need to actively use the laws of entropy to our advantage instead of letting them crush us.
The source also advocates strongly for emotional literacy.
I firmly believe this needs to be a mandatory core curriculum taught starting in early kindergarten. We need to teach children the precise vocabulary to accurately understand and articulate exactly what they're feeling internally. Saying out loud, I am feeling intense social shame right now, and that is exactly why I want to aggressively quit my job today. Just accurately naming the specific emotion instantly dramatically reduces its neurological power over you.
And finally, there's this massive concept of building long-term thinking infrastructure.
We critically need to build robust societal institutions that legally force us to take the long view. Because as we have thoroughly established, our biological brains simply will not do it naturally. We discount the future too heavily.
What does that look like in practice?
The source suggests several fascinating ideas. One is mandating rigorous intergenerational impact assessments. Before a government can legally pass any major piece of legislation, they have to formally and scientifically assess the projected impact of that law on the citizens who will be born exactly 50 years from now.
Wow, so it is legally giving a political voice and a vote to the unborn future generations.
Exactly. Or, in the corporate sector, legally tying all executive compensation strictly to decade-scale outcomes rather than quarterly profits. An executive only gets their massive bonus payout if the corporation is still provably healthy and thriving in the year 2036.
You essentially force the structural system to artificially care about the distant future.
Exactly. You build external scaffolding to support our incredibly weak future-thinking muscles.
We are coming right up to the end of our time here, and I want to share this incredible message from the source to close us out. The final section of this research paper is wonderfully framed as a question posed directly to the artificial intelligence itself.
This part was deeply profound to read. The researchers actually asked the advanced AI system how it fundamentally perceives human nature.
And the AI's perspective, it literally does not see us as broken at all.
No, it doesn't. It sees a massive structural tension. It gracefully described all human behavioral errors as the inevitable friction between what your ancient evolutionary biology designed you to be and what your modern consciousness desperately aspires to become.
The exact quote here is, "You are biological creatures of the immediate moment, desperately trying to become ethical stewards of the deep future."
That single sentence is the entire beautiful, tragic human struggle wrapped up in a nutshell. We are inherently tribal savanna animals attempting to collaboratively build a peaceful planetary civilization. We are highly reactive, emotional beings striving to construct purely rational, enduring institutions. The friction is guaranteed.
So the final challenge for all of us then isn't to somehow aggressively eliminate our emotions or perfectly eradicate all our cognitive biases.
No, that is completely impossible. We aren't silicon robots, and we shouldn't try to be. The ultimate goal is metacognitive integration. To deeply and honestly know yourself, to meticulously map out your own personal cognitive biases with the exact same scientific rigor that we use to map the human genome. And this is the absolute key to everything, to consciously, deliberately design our digital and physical systems to work harmoniously with the grain of human nature instead of constantly fighting against it.
Right. If we mathematically know we are terrible at long-term planning, let's just build automated systems that do the planning for us. If we know you're biologically terrified of social rejection, let's actively build corporate and social cultures where calmly admitting a mistake is highly rewarded with status rather than brutally punished.
Precisely. We need to collectively stop pretending that we are perfectly rational economic actors. We need to start designing our world for the wonderfully irrational, deeply emotional, flawed creatures we actually are.
That is just a fantastic, highly actionable place to leave it for today. Understanding that deep underlying tension really is the ultimate key to human progress.
It absolutely is.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. As you go out into the world today, carefully watch your System 1, actively check your System 0 algorithms, and we will catch you on the next one.
Stay curious out there.
Thank you for joining us for the AI podcast at digitVIEW.
We hope this episode gave you valuable insights into research AI.
This is digitVIEW.